Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. I'm Matt Amundson, the CMO of DuploCloud. I'm joined today by Patrick Monnot from Pod. We're so excited today to talk about him and his company, as well as his process of raising his seed round and what's coming up next for him and Pod. So let's jump right into it. Patrick, tell me a little bit about yourself and your company and the problem that you're solving.
Beautiful. First of all, Matt, very, very happy to be joining you today. Excited to talk a bit about Pod, the journey, myself, the problem, and how we help sales teams. So I'm the founder and the CEO of Pod. We're a sales coaching tool for B2B sellers. So what does that do typically is we help reps to manage their pipeline in a smarter way using a variety of different AI agents to guide them on the deals to focus on and the best actions to take to move deals faster and close them faster. It all started from previous life working with tech companies, from small startups to all the way to big enterprises. Had a chance to work with a lot of phenomenal account executives working on large, complex deals. And something that consistently came up was I saw these reps making mistakes and using a lot of guesswork in their day-to-day workflows. And as part of that, it ultimately led to them not necessarily knowing how to push a deal forward, or they weren't quite sure which deal to prioritize, or how to unblock a deal, or basically dropping the ball on day-to-day deal execution. And that at the end of the day has a huge impact on your ability to hit your quota, your overall performance as an AE. So we wanted to do something about it because we saw a lack of solution out there. We saw a lot of scattered information and we saw very little coaching. I think that's a big problem. If you're a rep, you might have, maybe 30 minutes a week with your manager. It ends up being a bit more of a grilling session than a proper coaching session. So we thought that we would create the perfect AI sales coach, right? It's like your top performer or your manager bringing their wealth of experience and all the data in the world to ultimately help them to make better decisions, make them faster, and ultimately, perform better. So that's a bit about how it came to life.
Yeah, so cool, so cool. So, there's obviously so many solutions that are in the marketplace today. Obviously, I think Gong is sort of everybody's de facto choice. It's like, hey, it's recording a call, so as a leader, I can listen to those calls, or I can use snippets of those calls from coaching. Talk a little bit about how AI is helping your company and ultimately your customers solve that problem in a more efficient way.
Yeah, I think that Matt, you pointed out correctly. There's a lot of different solutions. There's a lot of noise out there.
Yes.
And everyone using AI and coaching and sales intelligence. And it ends up being a bit of a soup of a similar term to refer to 10 different types of solutions for a different type of personas for different types of use cases. So
Yeah.
I think where we zero in and really focus on is on pipeline management. So you're an account executive on a complex B2B sales motion. We're really going to help you look at the 20, 30, 40 deals that you handle in a day-to-day that you're trying to push forward and close, and ultimately help you to navigate the ambiguity of that selling motion, so to speak. Whereas a Gong, when you think about coaching, is great for conversational intelligence.
Yeah.
So helping you understand what's happening on the call. Should you talk more, talk less? What are you talking about, et cetera, et cetera. Super, super helpful, relevant for all bunch of different types of reps. But we think about our support to being outside of, so to speak, the in-call experience. I'll give you a very simple example.
Yeah.
One of them is a big use case for our agent is optimizing your buying committee. So when you're working on a $500,000 deal, you have maybe 10, 15 different stakeholders involved.
Sure.
Well, how do you optimize that buying committee? And what Pod does is that it consolidates information across your CRM, your email, your calendar, your task, your notes, your call recording, your LinkedIn data, putting all these different data that today lives in disparate systems, bring this all together, and ultimately will look at historical trends to tell you who you should be adding to your buying committee that will increase your likelihood of closing the deal. It'll analyze sentiment using natural language processing to understand, okay, which stakeholder is not on board, or what are their concerns, or what are they excited about. And then ultimately matching with your sales methodology framework, guiding you on, hey, what should you be talking about with these different stakeholders to help you push the deal forward? So I think it's going back to my initial point, it's a very out of call experience and everything that surrounds it. And I think that's the biggest white space or gap, right? There's a lot of solution for prospecting. There's a lot of solution for forecasting. There's a lot of solutions for in-call experience, but what about everything else, right?
Yeah.
What about the 80% of their day that they spend scratching their head trying to figure out, okay, what the hell should I do here, right? I've been stuck and stalled on this deal. So that's where we come in, and this is where we think that we can add the most value for a B2B sales team.
I love that. I love that. I think about that all the time, and just terms of how much information is gathered in various different places. Just given the fact that, in today's sort of modern era of buying and selling, people want to have conversations in different places, even if they're not having sort of direct conversations. So the things that they say on LinkedIn, the things that they're engaging with on LinkedIn versus the things that they're telling you in email versus maybe the things that they're telling you in Slack. Having a process of pulling that all together and figuring out what's the realistic next step or the best next action for a sales rep to take, I think is really powerful.
Yeah.
Awesome. So as you think about, AI in the sales space, and we talked about the fact that there's quite a bit of noise, everything from, systems that'll write emails for you to systems that'll tell you, hey, don't say this word on a phone call. What do you think some of the most exciting use cases for AI are?
I think I like to think about the full realm of AI use cases split between low-hanging fruit and deep reasoning, so to speak. It's a very general segmentation, but I like to think about it this way. I think the low-hanging fruit are things that even today are already commoditized. Hey, can you help me to draft that email?
Yeah.
Can you summarize this call transcripts? Can you identify what are the next steps and drop the email? Even, getting a sense of how long have you talked on a call versus your prospect. All those things, I see them as being very, very commoditized. And more, there's an increasing number of solutions doing each of these own things. And very few software or solution that think about reasoning, right? And there's a concept going around about AI as a thought partner.
Yeah, sure.
Right? It's not there to do the work for you. It's not necessarily there to tell you exactly what the answer is. It's there to help you think through a problem.
Yeah.
Right? And again, focusing on our persona, the types of companies that we support, there's a lot of ambiguity in sales, and at times there's not one answer. So I think a very interesting use case is having a thought partner along your sales rep. So helping you to understand all the different data and guiding you on, hey, well, what is the action plan here? What are the different options? What are the potential impact? And so on and so forth. So less Boolean, so to speak, in the output and saying like, this is good email, this is bad email, but more nuance, so to speak. And I think that's where things are moving towards. Less automation, so to speak, and more reasoning. And it depends on, on the segment and the persona, et cetera. But I think this is something that is, that technology is just starting to be able to do in a very, very good way.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most exciting, and this is where we're spending most time right now at Pod.
Awesome. So we talked about what's exciting. What do you think some of the biggest risks or challenges are of applications that are using AI?
A good question. There are the standard ones like garbage in, garbage out data. Data is everything.
Yeah.
The quality of the data, the reliability, the accuracy, the timeliness of that data will forever be a very important input that will dictate the quality and reliability of the output as well. I think that's a universal problem. I think it is a risk. It is also something that can be circumvented by going to the primary source of information. Using a sales, very tangible example that I think a lot of salespeople will relate to. If you go to your CRM, the quality of the data in your CRM is probably not the best because maybe your salespeople don't like to update data, or it's a one-liner instead of a full-blown description.
Yeah.
That's one thing. But if you go directly to the emails, if you go directly to what's being said on the calls, that's the primary source of information. That is timely and accurate. So I think that's one risk that, ultimately, if you don't have the data, there's not much that you can do. You're not going to hallucinate and create stuff out of thin air, but it can be circumvented or minimized. I think the most important one, I think, is around the symbiosis, for lack of a better term, between the AI and the human. So I think a lot of people will look at technology and kind of slap that on top of a workflow or give that to someone and say, hey, you go at it, use this. This is super awesome. This is super great. And then adoption or the usefulness or the perceived value of such AI solution ends up being quite limited because, with the new technology in their hand, people don't necessarily know how to adopt it or how it can be used. So
Right.
I really think deeply about how do you embed in a very intuitive way artificial intelligence, or whatever the form that it takes, into the natural workflow of an individual and a new user. So that it's not necessarily a breakage in the way that they think or work, but actually something that either empowers it further or augments it. And I think that's very nuanced, and you have to spend a bit more time thinking through and going deeper into understanding what your persona does and think and work in order to design a solution that works best, as opposed to taking the easy route and just saying like, hey, here you go. Here's a chatbot that you can use. And at the end of the day, no one uses it. So no value, so no improvement.
Yeah, I think when you're talking specifically to a sales audience, like having the tool set in the location that they spend their time working, I think is the most essential part to driving usage. Because, these folks are dealing with multiple screens, and the more proliferation of tabs on their browser or widgets that they have to use, I think it just causes them to use it significantly less. But if you can embed it directly into their current workflow, that's how you drive a ton of usage. So I love that thought.
I think the format of the interface and the location has a big impact.
Yeah.
I think there's also just the things like the structure of the output.
Yeah.
Or which making, maybe it's a change management problem to some extent, but understanding at which point in their day can they leverage such solution to help them with a given output. I'll use a very simple example that we've recently, a few weeks ago, deployed a pod, but we were thinking about, hey, how can we look at all that information and help them prepare for a meeting, right? It would be easy to just either, make this available in a page somewhere, but we've actually, and you kind of hide it behind 3 tabs, so to speak, but we've actually created this meeting brief that it's sent by email 15 minutes or an hour before your meeting. So at the point in time where it's most relevant for the rep, which is 15 minutes before the meeting or an hour before, the output and the structure is actually formatted and delivered in a way that is easily digestible. So very intuitive, very simple. You get 5 notifications before a meeting by Zoom, Google Calendar, et cetera, already. Get an additional one, and then it's right there. So I think that's something that is, change management in light of new technology has always been difficult. And the fact that it's easier and easier to build solution, I think at times gets people to settle for less than optimal user experience. And I think that's something that there's a lot of opportunity for improvement across the board, and that ultimately have the best impact.
Yeah, love that. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about, Pod, the company, and your journey to sort of raising your seed round. Can you tell us a little bit about the story of going through that process and maybe some of the things that you learned along the way?
Definitely learned a ton. That's that's the constant here. So I started the company while I was still in San Francisco. I since moved back to Canada, to Montreal. We raised our first round, a pre-seed round of funding at the end of 2022, which was a fun time, if you guys all remember.
Yes.
Fun time to raise capital, but it was definitely an interesting one. But we got a chance to partner with great angel investors and a firm called Blink Capital. Awesome, as part of their fellowship program. And that kind of gave us some additional support, help, guidance, and obviously capital to push the concept further and launch publicly. Launching a few months afterwards, this is where we were really able to build a proof of concept with some traction, with some customer testimonials, with some metrics to be able to then raise our seed round. So I think the approach, that's what ultimately led to raise our seed round about a year ago or so. But I think that the process to raising is one that between my first round of funding and the second one, I think I improved, or at least I learned from my mistakes in the first one. But the approach I took, and I think it's one I encourage all founders to take, is leverage your network. It's similar to sales, right? A cold email, the likelihood of them answering is quite limited. When you talk to an investor, especially if they have no way to vet whether or not you're worth their time, so to speak. But if you get an introduction through another portfolio company, a mentor of yours, an advisor, another investor that whatever that might be, ultimately increases your likelihood of getting a meeting. So this was the channel, the approach that I personally took, and I think a lot of founders take, and it got us the opportunity to talk to the folks at Drive Capital, who led our recent round. Amazing folks. Shout out to Andy, who's now a member of our board.
Nice.
And I think what was quite awesome is how much they related and understood the problem we were trying to solve, while still understanding where we were in our journey and understanding that things will evolve. And I think that was core to the type of relationship I wanted to have with investors. Them being along with us on the journey to learn, as opposed to coming in with preconceived, concepts or a preconceived version of what the solution should be.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the partnership with our investors, both Blaine Capital and Drive Capital, has been super, super fun and
awesome.
And energizing, and ultimately led us to where we are today and have made a bunch of progress. So that's been the process, and it's an ongoing relationship, right? So it's not a one and done, but definitely kicked off on a good note.
Nice. Without going into specific detail, just tell us a little bit about how you put together the pitch deck. What were the sort of the concepts? Were there any metrics that you put in there? What were some of the things that you felt were important beyond just the idea and the concept of what Pod was going to be? But what were the things that sort of took you up a level professionally, so that folks felt like, oh, these guys are really serious. They don't just have an idea; they have a real business in mind here.
I think it comes down to a very crisp understanding and articulation, obviously, of the problem that you're solving, why it's important, why it's urgent, why it is valuable for companies or consumers, depending on your business, to solve it. I think problem is very important. Solution, and why your solution is different and has a moat or is 10x better than other solution. That's another piece. And then ultimately, what is the supporting either data, metrics, revenue that shows to some extent that you're on your path to solution to problem fit, right? That the problem that you're solving with a given solution is actually the right one, or at least in the right direction. So I think I don't think I'm saying anything crazy new to anyone. There's a bunch of template pitch decks out there to talk about the problem, the why now, the market, the solution, et cetera, et cetera. I think the biggest difference for me is, how do you craft that cohesive story from end to end? And it's very, I guess I'm going back to some of my consulting days, but like, beyond the slides are just a visual format or support to your story, but can you articulate very concisely in 5 minutes in a very crisp, no fat type of way, the story of why what you're solving is relevant, why it is important, why the way that you're solving is important, and how do you know that, so to speak, whether it's from your past experience or proof points. So I think that's the difference at times between a good pitch deck that has all the information and an impactful one where it's very clear from the get-go that, okay, well, that person has a very deep understanding of the problem and has come up with a solution that we think is going to win.
Yeah. What's the best piece of advice that you received during that process?
That's a good one. I have a lot of friends who raised capital before me, and had countless conversation with them about what they learned, and I made mistakes myself, but I think one that a very good friend of mine, Brandon, told me is being, I don't want to say coachable, but malleable, so to speak. I think there's a fine line between being overly confident and being self-aware, and at times being very, very confident is great. But I think investors might see this as, well, he is not going to be aware enough to understand when he's not in the right direction, and he's going to go down a rabbit hole. So I think a good, and that's as part of the relationship as well as part of the actual pitch, but being coachable and malleable, and being bold about a point, but balancing that with pressure testing your own assumptions. And I'm not sure I'm articulating it in the right way, but having that right balance between confidence that comes through across to the investors, but also the self-awareness of, hey, these are all hypotheses that we're trying to solve. We're confident about it, but would love your input as well. So
Yeah.
I think that's something that has been very, very helpful to me, because at first you come in and you're like, hey, I need to be super, super confident and be bold about everything. And you come across, not overly pushy, but very, very short-sighted, so to speak, or narrow-sighted, so to speak, in your pitch. And I think that takes away from the natural nature of these conversations as well. So that's something that stuck with me, and that ultimately helped me in the delivery of the pitch, and in the way I handle these conversations.
Awesome. Love that. That's great feedback for everybody who's thinking about raising around at whatever stage they're at. So we're going to wrap things up here. First of all, I want to thank you so much for your time. I know how busy you are building a company, probably selling every product, probably writing every blog post and every line of code in the product. So thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you. Tell us a little bit about, one, how we can get a hold of you, and two, how we can learn more about Pod.
Beautiful. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Enjoy the conversation. Pod, our website, workwithpod.com. A lot of information out there. We have a blog, we have, videos, and you can reach out and book a demo with us directly through there. On LinkedIn as well, Patrick Monnot. I love posting content, engaging with people within the tech, the entrepreneur, and the sales community. So always open for connecting with awesome folks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Patrick. Have a lovely weekend, and thank you guys all so much for joining us today. All the information will be listed below if you want to get a hold of Patrick or if you want to get a hold of Pod. And I recommend you do so because your sales cycles are complex and Pod is here to help. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt.